Many of you already know, she's got her mouthful, Dr. Meredith Critchfield, and she is an associate professor here. Both of us have experience in supervising faculty. She did so previously and was on my hiring committee, and I do so now, and that's what I do primarily at this point. I only teach a few classes at a time now. So we have experience in this area. I kind of want to gauge the audience just a little bit first before we get started. What majors do we have represented here? Early childhood. Raise your hand.
They're almost all elementary, right?
All elementary ed? Any dual majors? Okay, got some dual majors. Awesome. And then seniors, juniors, seniors, raise your hand. Okay, juniors? Love it.
We have a sophomore.
Okay, and a sophomore too? Yay. Very well done. It is never too early to start thinking about this, so I love that. Thank you.
And online folks, we would love for y'all to type in your responses. Miss Eva will see them, and she's in control of the screen, so definitely type away, share everything that you want to respond to or questions you want to ask. And same thing with you guys here present today. If you have a question, don't wait until the end. We want this to be as interactive and informative as possible, and so if something pops up in that moment, don't let it go. Raise your hand, ask us, and if it's good for you, it's probably good for the mass. So definitely don't be shy about asking anything that's on your mind with this process.
And to confirm, those online can hear us, right?
Yep.
All right, perfect.
Awesome. So let's take away. So this is a QR reader code. So for those of you who have QR readers, if you want access to this presentation, you can snap a shot really quickly or snap a shot afterwards. We just want to make sure you have access to everything that we're going to talk about today. So we are going to start in by how to kind of just kill the teacher interview and do a great job and come in confident and maybe walk away with a job. And we're going to do everything we can to talk about this process in a way that no matter what teaching position you're aiming for, no matter what state you're in, we want you to feel like you're going to take away something from this. So whether you are getting a job in Minnesota, Hawaii, or Arizona, we're going to talk to you hopefully in a way that you're going to take something from this. So that's our goal. Of course, we love objectives as good education professors. So we are going to kind of tap into your prior knowledge first. We're going to talk a lot about soft skills or people skills. My goodness, in our COE classes, we talk a lot about those hard skills. What's the strategy? How are you going to assess? How do you align objectives with your assessments? We talk about all those hard skills. But something that's a little bit more difficult to teach and perhaps a little bit more difficult to finesse on your own are those soft skills. So we're going to talk a lot about that. We're going to talk about what are appropriate interview responses and then some of your takeaways, hopefully, at the end. So that's our plan. So what we would love for y'all to do in online folks, if you'll type away, share with the person next to you if you're a group of 2, but if you are a group of 3 or 4, we want you to, you have a whole row of people to chat, we want you to do that. Take a few moments and share what you already know about resumes, letters of recommendations, materials to bring, or what we call artifacts, how to dress, mannerisms, anything at all that you know, we want you just to spill it out. Okay, take 2 minutes. She's so good. All right, so we'll come back together. So share on anything that y'all came up with, anything that you know is standard interview protocol or things that you can expect And Ms. Eva, I'll ask you in a moment for a few of our online responses. What do y'all come up with? What do we need to be prepared for, to bring, how to dress, anything we already know?
Bring water.
Yes, bring water. We learned from Dr. Victor Diaz, those of you who are in my EDU 480. He is the HR director, so he hires and fires teachers for the Phoenix Elementary School District, and he definitely recommends bringing water. It's a moment for you to stop and pause, catch your breath, and kind of let a question ruminate in your mind, if you will, before you feel like you have to dive in. So water is a great, great kind of trick, if you will. Good. What else do we know?
Your resume.
Yeah, absolutely. Very nice to bring a resume. Now, bringing resumes are only as good as you having enough copies for the people that are going to be there. So in advance, you're going to want to ask some questions, which we'll talk about to help you make sure you have enough copies for everybody, who will be in attendance, etc. So we're going to break that down a bit. Ms. Eva, what did y'all find online? What do you know so far?
Our online folks are saying to don't be shy, smile, dress to impress, bring 2 resumes or more, and letters of references. Present yourself as a person interested in the job, have a clean, strong resume, and some questions on what they should include for artifacts.
Good, excellent.
Perfect.
We'll definitely get to that. So some of what our online folks did was mention some soft skills. And so that's where we're going to hop in next, is talk about some of those soft skills.
All right, so when we talk about soft skills, we're going to mention some of these best practices that you see listed up here. A lot of this is going to seem almost too common of knowledge, but it's important to know what's expected and what you should be doing prior to going into it and really prepping yourself about that ahead of time. So one of the things that you see here is the appropriate body language. And there is a lot as far as this is concerned. And one of the things that you want to do when you're going into an interview is you want to square out those shoulders ahead of time and be presenting that and looking directly at the person with whom you're speaking, okay? So that's one part of body language. If you're going in and your shoulders are slunched over and you're looking like this, what message is that conveying to your audience? Do you seem confident? No. Did I take what you were going to say?
Yeah.
Good. We're in the same line of thought. So you want to make sure that you are presenting yourself in a physical manner through your body language that you are confident. And so having those square shoulders, shoulders back, head raised, that's part of that as well. You'll also notice that as I'm going through here, I'm stopping and I'm pausing and I'm making eye contact with each and every one of you. One reason, because you're all really important to this process. I want to be establishing a rapport with you. I want to be establishing a relationship with you. And so that's why it's important for me to pause and make sure. Now, you don't want to be staring at someone for too long, because how does that make them feel? A little uncomfortable, right? So being mindful of that as well. You want to just make sure that you're acknowledging everybody in the audience. And it may be that you have just one other person in there with you. But it could also be that you have an entire panel. And we'll discuss a little bit more of that at a time, but it's important that you make that connection with each of them. Every now and again, when we're nervous and we are in front of people, there are some other behaviors that we'll engage in. And one of them is unnoticed, but we can have a little bit of a hand tremor or a little bit of a handshake. And that's okay. It's okay to be nervous. But if it's going to be unsettling for you, then some things that you can do to remedy that are to just clasp your hands in front of you, okay? Or as you're speaking, try to make sure your hands are really firm, and that is actually going to reduce the likelihood of your hands having a little bit of a tremor to go along with that as well. But again, it's okay to be nervous, it's expected, all right? So fidgeting. I'll tell you one of the biggest challenges that I have in the interview process is if someone brings a pen in with them that has the clicker on the end. And what they don't realize is that they're sitting there, and as they're responding, they're clicking.
And it's not even intentional, right?
They
Like,
don't
it's
know.
just sort of this nervous habit. They're not trying to annoy you, annoy the interviewer. They're just simply out of habit doing it. And so don't bring the pin in that has the click. That's one simple, small thing you can do to avoid that nervous tip.
Something else that you'll want to watch is any other additional fidgeting that you might do. In some of this, you're going to want to rely on the other people around you, people with whom you're close, to let you know what are some of my habits. Sometimes girls tend to do this a lot. Guys too. Guys
For
can have-
online folks, she's pulling her hair and kind of stroking it.
They'll kind of do that. On occasion, someone will be kind of picking at their nails, picking at their hands. A lot of leg shaking will kind of take place as well. And you especially want to watch that in the event that you're sitting at a table and then you're shaking the table. And so everybody else is noticing that too. So these are just some of the things that you kind of want to get to know about yourself prior to going into it. So then you can identify some of those coping strategies before that moment. Talking about posture, there are a few different things as far as posture is concerned. And that's going to, well, we'll talk about that one in a second. But when you are sitting, one of the best things that you can do if you are a lady is to simply cross at the ankles down below. You can also cross your legs, but if you're going to be one that's going to be shaking your foot underneath the table and possibly shaking the table, then you might want to refrain from doing that.
I like how some of y'all naturally crossed your feet at the ankles after hearing the advice to do that, and so some of you go.
You'll also notice that I'm leaning in as I'm sitting here on the table. If I were to be laid back like this, that again, it conveys a message that we are not entirely interested in the position. Maybe we feel a little bit superior to the others around us, and that's not a message that we want to convey, okay?
And I just now had he was a student that is now a student teacher. He went in for the paid student teaching interview. And online folks, if you're not here, we have paid student teaching opportunities at certain districts in Arizona. So he went in, and his casual approach had him leaning back, just kind of hanging out. And he was hoping to get a middle school paid student teaching position. He got rejected from all of them. He is now doing a non-paid first grade student teaching placement, the exact opposite of what he hoped to do. And they specifically said to him, your casual, soft skill approach doesn't work. You need to treat this as seriously as he literally was arms crossed, leaned back, just sort of hanging out. And he literally is missing out on thousands and thousands of dollars simply by virtue of him not carrying himself in the way that I know he's able to do. So.
And whether or not, perception is not always reality.
Yeah.
Right? So in reality, this individual really wanted that paid position. Who wouldn't, right? But his body language was giving them the perception that he could care less. So that's why these soft skills are so important, right? So I'm sitting here, and my hands are, those of you online, I'm sitting beside a table, behind a table. I'm leaning forward toward my audience to give them the impression that I am entirely interested in everything that they're saying. And then I also have my hands clasped on top of the table. You do not want someone questioning on the other side of the table what you're doing with your hands under the table. Seems odd, but you don't want for anything to be triggered in their minds that's going to distract from what you're trying to do there. And so I encourage you to, when you come in, place your items in front of you and then have your hands clasped on top, okay? Any questions about some of that so far? Yes. What's your name?
I'm Victoria.
Victoria, nice to meet you.
So if like a hand talker, would you like, if you're like close up your hand?
Totally fine.
Yeah.
Totally fine. Yeah, it's okay to talk with your hands. I'm a big hand talker myself, and I feel like that's part of the way that I'm able to share my experience and my ideas. That's all right, and that actually helps some people to express themselves in a little bit more of a comfortable manner. If you're trying to prevent yourself from doing that. You might be thinking too much about this and not talking with your hands, and that's going to impede your ability to express your ideas.
Communication scholars have done a lot of studies on nonverbal communication, and they say that over 70% of communication that's received is entirely nonverbal, and only around 30% is actual verbal communication. So while these soft skills seem so obvious, and so like you're telling us things that we sort of already know, the most important thing is for you to now walk out of here and think, what am I doing that lines up with these? And what am I maybe unintentionally or unknowingly doing that doesn't line up with these? Because if 70% of your message is wrapped up in those skills, that body language, you have to be really aware of what you're communicating. We want to practice handshakes with y'all because there are two approaches to the handshake. There's the bone crusher, and then there's the limp fish. And I have actually heard people not get hired based on their handshake because the immediate impression that they received, body language, the immediate impression was that this person was going to get run over by their students. Because when they walked up, they had the limp fish and shook their hand like they were just, hi, nice to meet you. Now, were they orally communicating that they were just sort of scared and nervous and timid? No, but their hand sure did. And I've heard them say, absolutely, we can't do that. The other approach is to overcompensate with bone crushing. I used to do that. I was like, I'm a woman, and I know I'm going to be interviewed by men, and I'm going to go in and show the superintendent I got it. So I go in and I'm like, you know, and I'm sure he walked away thinking, okay, WWE lady, calm down. So you want to be mindful and not overcompensate in the other direction. So let's practice it. Folks, I know it's online a little hard for you to practice, but perhaps you could shake your own hand. What we would love for y'all to do is turn to one person next to you now, and then you'll do a second round, and shake their hands, and then tell them forthright, yes, great handshake, no, not good handshake, or any level in between. All right, so one round, turn, shake hands.
I don't
Hold on to it. Somebody else do it.
All right, so very well done on that. A couple of other things that I want to mention as far as dress is concerned. You need to be aware of your audience. So one of our images up here talks about being clean shaven, nice fresh haircut, all of this. We need to be aware of the school dress codes when we go in for, for a interview, excuse me. We have some friends of ours that have sleeves, that have tattoo sleeves. And so when they come in for their interview and when they're at work, it's long sleeves all the time because that's part of what is required there. So you need to be aware of that. Any additional piercings that you may have on your face, you want to be cognizant of whatever the dress code is at the school ahead of time. You can identify that information by going to a district website or a school website. They'll often have an employee handbook listed there, and you can go through and peruse that. So that's something you want to think about. If you're going to apply for a job at Google or Microsoft or some other, tech company, they don't necessarily care whether you have short hair, long hair, come in shorts, because that's just kind of the environment in which they work. That's not the same with schools. And you have to be aware of the fact that you are going to be presenting yourself as role models on this campus, and you don't want that to be a non-starter if you're coming in for an interview and they're seeing things that they're automatically like, well, we'd have to talk to them about this before we hire them, right? They probably would just rather avoid that right along.
Yeah. And one rule that I've heard before is, so if you're going in for a teaching position, you want to dress 1 to 2 levels above that position for your interview. So if you were going in for a teaching position, you would dress as the principal would. That's 1 level above you. or even 2 levels, how the superintendent dresses every single day. So you want to dress a level or 2 above for that interview. You don't want to dress as a teacher would day to day. You want to level it up, whether you are male or female. When in doubt, dress more formally. I've never heard anybody not get hired for dressing too formally. I have heard lots of comments about people who didn't come in appropriate outfits. Now, I have to say this. Many of y'all in this room are younger, and sometimes perhaps what we think is a conservative dress, because you're just by age, is not necessarily conservative to someone in their 40s, 50s, 60s. So you have to be mindful of what is conservative for your age group, and then what is conservative for teaching, and then dress to what is conservative for teaching. Also pay attention to little details. Men, are your nails trimmed and clean, right? Do you have dirt under them or not? Ladies, are your nails either clean or painted and not entirely chipped? Hair, all of those little fine details they will notice. Most stuffed shoes you own, those aren't your shoes to wear. They will pay attention to those sorts of things. Maybe they would not hire you for those reasons, but they will certainly say, okay, we have 2 candidates that are both excellent, or someone who has more experience than this person, you have to set yourself apart in some way. And one of the best ways and simplest ways to do that is dress. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add to the dress front.
Part of, for ladies, the way that you are seated will also be a factor. As I mentioned earlier, crossing your legs at the ankle, but if you have a dress that is too short and you tend to cross your legs, you have to be really mindful of that. Every now and again, you will not be interviewed in a situation where you are on another side of the table. You might actually be with nothing in between you and the other person seated there. And so if you're going to cross your legs and you're wearing something too short, that's a distraction that shouldn't be in an interview setting.
Any questions on dress? Yeah.
We actually have a question. How do you not feel nervous during an interview?
How do you not feel nervous? So practice. Practice, practice, practice.
We get to that.
Yes, yeah, we will get to it and really going through those questions over and over, but we will definitely talk about that. Good. Anything else about the soft skills? Mannerisms, dress, eye contact, handshakes, anything that you are not sure if it's considered appropriate or inappropriate? I know some of y'all are planning on going to teach back east or in the Midwest. You need to dress up more than perhaps we do out here. Like, you really need to dress up. Those of you who are going to be on the East Coast, even Chicago area, etc.
Yeah. Would you say like suits are appropriate? I just know for my sister, she had a communications job, but like her first outfit for an interview, she wore like a suit.
Great question. I have my opinion on that. Do you want to share yours?
I feel that you should be wearing what is going to be most comfortable for you, that is also very, very professional. So I personally love wearing slacks and blazers. I mean, just come on. For me,
she is a professor elbow patch.
Elbow patches, for those of you online, I heart elbow patches. I love blazers. I have a ton of them. So, and I love slacks. So for me, that's what I feel most comfortable wearing. And so you want to dress to impress, but in a way that's going to make you comfortable, and not, you don't want that to be distracting for you either, you know?
Yeah, and if any of you guys are looking for affordable places to find professional clothing, men or women, I've talked to students before who went out into their interviews and we talked about where they got their clothing. I know the cost might be a concern for some of you, so just let me know and I'm happy to share some names of places where people ended up getting a nice blazer or a nice slack suit or dress outfit, pantsuit, whatever. I'm happy to share those names, so just let us know. Professor Sprudy started to talk about seating arrangement, and we want to kind of make you all aware of the different options that are out there, and then what kind of materials and artifacts you should plan to bring, and have it ready. So we're going to kind of show you, and online we'll do our best to sort of narrate for you some of the different options that are out there. So one option, and I consider it to be perhaps one of the most awkward options, is when the interviewer and interviewee are seated directly next to one another. In that case, if you are seated directly next to one another, you are going to turn posture, of course, is in place, and you're gonna try to do your best to square off your shoulders, okay? You don't necessarily have to open the body all the way to them, but the shoulders need to be square to them to show them that you are communicating directly with them and you care. Now, some of y'all might be saying, but how do I know if they're gonna want me to sit next to them? You should ask. When you walk into that room, you need to say to them, you know, thank you so much for, right, we're standing in, we're walking in. Thank you so much for taking the time to interview me. I'm really excited for this opportunity. Where would you like me to sit? Okay, you never want to presume where you are sitting, especially not at the head of the table. Please don't presume that, because I have been interviewed by principals and superintendents. Guess who got the head of the table? The suit, not me. Right? And I had to be really intentional about asking about that before I went in and not presuming that they wanted me to be the star of the show, because some of them just don't operate that way. They have a different dynamic there. So ask where you would like them to sit. So the side-by-side is an option. You can also do the other one. We call this the tunnel version. The tunnel seating arrangement, when you have a big boardroom table and you're at one end and someone or many people are at the other end, and you feel like you're shouting, and it is quite awkward. But you can still do your best to square off, make eye contact. Just know that you have to more orally project than you would if you were sitting side by side, nice and cozy. Third one, online folks, we're sitting directly across from one another at a table. And that can be a big table or small table, but that's, I think, nice and easy and not so intimidating. And then there's a fourth one. This one I think is pretty common. And this is where you're sort of at the corner of a table, and one person is on one side of the table, the other person's on the table, but you're on the other side of the table, but you're only separated by the corner, and that's a nice, easy way to kind of make eye contact with one another. Any questions about seating arrangements, or how to ask where to sit, or anything along those lines?
I have been super privileged to actually have been in another instance where there was no table at all. So they were just two chairs right beside one another. And when you're coming in and you have all of your resources, my suggestion is that you come in with something along these lines that can contain all of the artifacts that you would like to bring with you, your resume, lesson plan examples, things along those lines. We'll get to the artifacts in a moment. But if you have something along those lines, then it could be filed in here and closed back down, and it could be placed on your lap. Or if you have even more things, which I wouldn't encourage you to have much more than something along these lines. I mean, you know, rolling in with one of our cards the way we are.
Online folks, Professor Spurdy has like a billfold right now, like a beefed up folder.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know. Yeah. Beefed up folder is not the technical term for the record, but that's what we'll call it.
Yeah. And so there is a word for it. It's just slipping my mind right now. But anyway.
Folio?
So folio.
Folio.
Yes. And so you can use that and just place it on your lap. And then again, have your legs crossed in front of you. Gentlemen, you can just have your legs flat in front of you as well. That's okay. But this is one other instance, and that one was really awkward, but I made it through. And I got the job.
Yay.
Okay, so now we have copies and placement of materials, which kind of flows into what this part is here as well. Again, having something along these lines that you can have in front of you. If you do not have a table in front of you, again, I would suggest having it in your lap, or you could always place it on the ground in front of you. Word of caution, depending on what you're wearing, if you're needing to bend down and pick something up, ladies, you need to be aware of your décolleté area and the cut of your blouse. And then you also want to make sure that your clothing may not be too tight. As odd as that is, my husband has actually split his pants twice. Granted, he's a physical therapist, so he has to get down with his patients, but it happens at work. And so we had to face reality and upsize. So anyway, you want to be mindful of that, because how terrible would that be in the middle of an interview? And then also with that, the length of the dress, once again, if you're leaning over to pick something up, you just want to make sure you'll see that both of us have dresses that are long enough that can go below our knees. So there's that. We talked about copies, mentioned that a little bit, but let's elaborate.
So copies, one thing that ends up being pretty awkward, I find, for the interviewer is when the applicant hasn't brought enough materials in to cover all the people that will be in attendance. So one way that you can go around that is to email or phone call with whomever has invited you for the interview in advance and say, I'm very much looking forward to this opportunity. Is there anything specific you would like me to bring, and how and who will be in attendance? So how many people will be there and who will be there? Because if there are going to be other teachers there, that might shift your game a little bit in how you respond than if it's just the superintendent. I have just had interviews with superintendents and principals, that's it, not another teacher in sight. So that really kind of shifts things and kind of shifts the questions that they might ask as well. So again, email in advance or phone call, even better, in advance, and ask them who will be in attendance and how many people, so you can get a sense of exactly what to bring. Anything else about that? No? Okay. So let's talk about what to actually bring. So you definitely need to make enough copies for everyone in attendance. And you need to be intimately familiar with those materials. So if you're going to print them out and bring them, they need to be materials or artifacts that you're very much comfortable with. So first things first, you need to have a teacher resume. And if you're in my 480 class, we go over exactly what should be in a teacher resume. If you're not sure and you want some feedback, the Career Services Center at GCU does do that. So online, folks, that's available to you. Career Services, you send them a copy, just an attachment of your resume, and they will break it down and give you feedback. Professor Sprudy and I are happy to do that as well. Our contact information is in our slideshow and up here on the board. You're more than welcome to email us and ask us for feedback, and we'll kind of just give it to you straight, what you need to fix for that. So you need to have enough copies of your resume for everyone. Another thing that I really love as the interviewer is when the applicant brings in a full unit plan, a full high-quality unit plan, like you do in the benchmark for ELM 360 or the benchmark for EDU 480. I love that, because that says to me that you're thinking comprehensively about what a unit of time is going to look like. And a lesson plan is good, and if they tell you to bring a lesson plan, do that. But if they don't tell you anything, I would bring a unit plan and make sure you can really speak to that. You want to be able to say, oh, and on day 2, this is the neat think, pair, share strategy we did. And on day 4, this is the Kagan cooperative group roles that we did. You really want to be able to speak to the different parts and parcels of your unit plan. So I love resumes, I love unit plans. What am I missing?
Classroom management.
Yeah.
So very often in your program of study here, you are going to be going through, what would it be, 450, I think is one of the classroom management classes. And you have to come up with a classroom management plan. And so you'll want to make sure that not only is it evidence-based, it's supported by outside research, but it is very well explained. So that you can relay when they ask you, so tell us what your classroom management plan would be for. You want to gear it towards the age group that you are applying. So if you're applying for a preschool position, it should be developmentally appropriate for preschool. If you're applying for a high school position, you need to be cognizant of that as well.
Right, a sticker reward system doesn't work for a 12th grader. So be mindful that the plan matches the environment, and also that the plan aligns with the values and mission statement of the school. If you are going into a traditional academy and telling students that they are going to just do positive behavior support systems all day long, that might not necessarily, in part it might, but in part it might not line up with that school's mission. So you want to be authentic to yourself, but at the same time, you need to make sure that if you really want that job, that that behavior management plan lines up with what the school says is important to them. And what you've done your research, right? You've been on the website. You know exactly what's expected in that school. And so you want that plan to match up with that. Yeah.
Any questions along those lines? So that brings us into the next part, which is fielding those interview questions. You will want to, again, do your due diligence before the interview itself. I highly suggest you do it in that application process. Don't apply if this isn't someplace that you think is going to be a good fit for you. Don't waste their time, don't waste your time. Move right along until you find a district or a school that you feel their mission, their values align with your own. So in doing that research, you also want to identify some potential interview questions. And it's not a matter of just saying, well, they could ask me this or they could ask me that. It's you think of these questions and you devise responses to them ahead of time. So we have some questions that we'll end up sharing with you that are some pretty high likelihood that some of these could possibly be asked in an interview. So what we would encourage you to do is to not only look at these, but then also think about the school itself and then identify some additional questions that could be going on that way. As silly as this is, once you have that example or your planned response, practice it. Practice it in front of the mirror. See yourself, so it's going to help with your entire visualization once you're in that moment and they ask that question and it can trigger that. And you're going to be able to go through and think about it again. Other options would be, sometimes districts are actually interviewing, they're doing initial screeners via a virtual meeting. And so you might want to practice ahead of time by having a Skype or a Zoom meeting with somebody and then practicing interviewing you that way so that you can kind of work out some of that anxiety that you might have ahead of time. Anything else with that one?
No, I have something with number 2.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. So when you come up with those questions, practice them. Say them to other people in your life that can be honest with you, not just someone that's a pleaser. You want to ask somebody that's going to be honest and say, I don't think this is the best example for you to include here. I think you should be more specific, or whatever the case may be. And then practice, 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 practice. All right, so number 2, in the event that a question is asked, it is totally okay for you to ask them to repeat the question. It gives you the opportunity to pause and think through again. Then we had another tip too that you were going to indicate from.
Oh yeah, drinking, Dr. Diaz mentions taking a sip of your water, really pausing. We would rather y'all wait an extra 10 seconds to respond and be really thoughtful in your response than to launch in and start on this meandering path and these examples that we cannot connect with and that don't actually answer the question. And so we strongly recommend ask to repeat the question. Now, if y'all are doing that 4 times in an interview, that's going to look strange. But if you do it once or maybe twice, that's not a problem. If you stop and maybe jot something down in your notes, okay, and then go into your response. Take a little slug of water, whatever you need to do. We would rather you wait 10 seconds and get it right than to go on to this 5-minute response that doesn't actually answer what we're looking for.
We just had an opportunity to interview for another faculty chair position. And one of the candidates is incredibly intelligent. And we went through and asked a series of questions. And afterwards, we had no idea what he was talking about. So
I actually think
really, really great candidate, incredibly experienced, very knowledgeable, professional in every sense of the word, but he would go in circles. And at the end of the day, he didn't really answer any of our questions to the extent that we wanted for him to, and we had to pass. So there is something to this. Take that pause, take that break, ask to repeat the question, and also if you're not sure, ask for clarification. That's all right. I'm not sure I'm understanding what you're asking here. Would you mind phrasing it in a different way?
Or would you provide an example for me of like something that you've experienced. It's okay to ask for those sorts of clarifications and examples. Perfectly fine.
Yeah, because then you're going to be able to get from point A to point B a lot faster than if you were just speaking in circles for 5 minutes.
All right, so when responding to the interview questions, almost all of us have a filler. The filler is an or something more lengthy and sophisticated. You know what I'm saying? Are you sure you get it? Is that okay? Right? Things like that. So we all have fillers. The question is, what is your filler? And you need somebody on the outside to identify that for you. Some of y'all in your feedback cards, when you taught in my class, I told you your filler. And so you probably need to be aware of that, and I'll continue to tell you your filler. Some of you haven't had that opportunity yet. So you need to ask someone, what is my filler? What am I trying to fill the space with? And how do I fix it? So the more comfortable you get with fielding questions, and the more practice you do, the more you look in the mirror, the more you talk to someone and share those answers, the fillers will start to run away. Fillers come from a lack of practice. Fillers come from a lack of experience. Fillers come when you don't feel like you are authentic and real enough to hold this position. You feel like you're faking it till you make it. When you feel like you're faking it till you make it, the fillers just come flooding in. And so if you turn that into what we call a humble confidence, y'all need to trust you are getting a job. You are getting a job. You are in a perfect time. When I graduated, there were no jobs. None. Not a one. And it was incredibly competitive to get a job. Now y'all are like, where? Anybody? I'll take it, right? So many opportunities are going to come your way. So you have to have some confidence in that. The other extreme of that, and I think perhaps in a Christian life, you need to come to it humbly. Because guess who's sitting at that table? People with a heck of a lot more experience than you. These are people that have devoted their lives to education, especially if you're in a public school, and a lot of those people have had a lot of certifications, a lot of degrees, masters, multiple masters, doctorates. These are people who are sitting there because they're so entirely devoted to education. So you don't want to come in as if you own the space, and I know none of y'all will do that because I know almost all of you, and I know you're all just brilliant and kind and wonderful and totally gracious, but just be mindful of that, because I think this climate can trick a lot of us to think that we're just going to go in and rock it when you don't know who else is interviewing for that. Because the person that could be interviewing for that could be somebody coming to that district who has 5 years experience. I'll give you all an example. We see that in Kyrene all the time. Kyrene is a district that's right by my house, very popular, very successful district. We have a lot of our student teachers who go on to try to get a job in Kyrene, and they don't get it. And they think they're going to get it because of the climate. And they're like, yes, there's so many jobs. Not in Kyrene, there aren't. Not in Chandler, there aren't. Not in Gilbert, they're not. Not in Scottsdale, there's not. There's not as many jobs as you might think are available to you. So just be mindful of that and come to it with some humility as much as possible. Anything you want to add?
Yes.
My soapbox rant.
When you, which is awesome. I'm going to go back to the fillers one again really quick. When you record your responses ahead of time and you sit back and you replay, you're going to catch some of these fillers as well. So that's another reason why it's a good idea for you to kind of get in the habit of recording yourself so that you can self-identify some of these things. Being concise, we talked about that. Stop, think about it, plan your response ahead of time.
It actually drives me nuts when people aren't concise. And it might drive me nuts because I'm reflecting my own problems when I used to interview for teaching jobs. But I would go on and on. And I looked back now, I'm like, I bet I was really annoying. I would rather y'all be concise, say exactly what you think, give me an example. That's like the perfect formula. Say what you believe or what you know, give an example. That's it. That's the formula to answering teacher interview questions. What you know, example. What you know, example. That's it. And if you get into the 5th and 6th example, you are no longer concise. And you've lost interest of your interviewer. So I can't say enough about concision.
Yes. And along those same lines, and this ties in with preparing those responses ahead of time, sharing specific examples. I can almost 100% guarantee they are going to ask you something about a time when you had a challenging experience with a student, a peer, a colleague, a teacher, something along those lines. And you want to come prepared with the response. if it's a teacher. I firmly believe in the importance of collaboration. However, I did have a bad experience when I was in a CLC assignment with other classmates, and this is how we worked through it.
Which none of you guys can relate to, I'm sure. All
Right?
of your CLCs are really wonderful and fulfilling. Group assignments, they always go well, right?
So you flipped it on what you know to be true and know to be important, right? Collaboration is key. They want to hear that, okay? They want to know that you were prepared and you've had this experience. And then what was that I tailed on the end of it? How we worked through it, okay? So very specific. Classroom management. Talk to me about your classroom management. You want to have some specific examples. When I was in my student teaching, it was a third grade classroom, and I had a student, X, and he was engaging in these behaviors. What we did to extinguish those behaviors in the class was we instituted a behavior management plan with him. And so then again, you've got that specific example. Think of them ahead of time.
Yeah.
You've got practicum experience, you've got student teaching experience. Make a little note, jot it down in a journal so that you can go back and reflect on that later on and potentially incorporate it into your responses.
I think one of the best exercises you all can walk away and do is not just launch into the interview questions that we give you, but to pick a couple that require examples and to write them out. I actually would write, like in a journal, my answers to these questions. So I would write down about a time when XYZ behavior management plan failed, or a student who really kind of pushed me because they were an at-risk reader, whatever. I write those down first because if any of y'all know, in EDU 480, I talk about how much I love writing. It's because what happens when you write is that it solidifies it in your mind in a way that if you just orally say it, it doesn't do. You have to do both. You have to write it down, really deeply reflect, and then say it. And I promise it's going to come out in a more meaningful way for your interviewer to listen to and to appreciate than if you just sort of think of one in your head, maybe even just share it to a friend. You've got to write it down. Write it down. Yay. Okay. Questions for the interviewers. At the end, if the interviewer is worth his or her weight and knows what they're doing, they will ask you if you have questions. If they're not asking you that question, what does that say about them? That might not be your school. Because if they don't really care what questions you have, like if it's kind of like if you're going out on a date and your first date, you're at this great dinner and you're asking all the questions and answering all, or you're answering everything, and then they don't even really care to respond or to see more about you, then that's not your soulmate. Same thing goes with schools. You've got a date. You've got to figure out if they're a good fit for you. And so they should be asking you if they have questions, if you have questions. And you should prepare those in writing in advance. They should not be something that comes off the top of the head. They should be something written down in a notebook. Is it okay to take a notebook into an interview? 100%. I would hope you would. I hope you come in with writing materials and a non-clickable pen. But you have to have those written down and then put some space between those questions so that you can jot down notes. There's nothing wrong with jotting down notes, nothing. In fact, it says to me, you're taking this seriously and you're really metacognitively processing what I'm giving to you. So yeah, 2 to 3 questions. You definitely want to have them prepared. Professor Sprudy, are there any that you love hearing more than others? Questions that you're like, oh yeah, I like that.
I like when they have done their research ahead of time in terms of our school or in terms of our institution. And so they would have gone to the, in our case, the university website. One of the things that we often bring up is our conceptual framework in the College of Education. And I like when they can actually respond to that and ask the additional questions about it. They know it, they've been to it, they believe in it, something along those lines. In your particular position, you might want to be asking them specific questions about their character counts program, or their positive behavior support, or their classroom management, or what opportunities do I have here to engage in collaboration with my peers? They like to hear that.
Yes.
So that's a good question. Like, do you guys have monthly PLCs Or do you have every week an early release so that the fellow teachers have an opportunity to get together and work? I think those are really good. I also think a really great one is if you say, you know, I'm new to teaching, and while I feel confident in the education that I receive, I know I still have a lot to learn. Do you offer a mentorship program?
I love that question. I think it's so necessary in the dating process, really, to be asking them what they provide for that.
So that sends a message two ways. One, that humble confidence that we talked about there, right? Two, a willingness to work with others. And actually, three, a growth mindset. It's letting them know I'm not immovable here. There is opportunity for growth here, and I am ready and willing to receive the support and do the work to get there.
And you're also thinking about retention, right? Like you're thinking about, you want to be in this for the long haul. And for a principal, they're mostly concerned right now with teacher retention. So when they're hiring you, they're not hiring you typically for a semester gig unless it's an exception, somebody's out on maternity leave. They're typically thinking long haul for you. And so if you can ask a question that proves that you're in it for the long haul, that is a slam dunk. Because they're like, oh, this person really does want to be a part of this community for a long term. And if you're thinking mentorship programs, longer term opportunities to collaborate, those are ways to definitely show you are in it for this school for the long run and not for a short-term gig.
Yes.
We have a question. What are the questions to ask when you want to know how much you will get paid?
That is not something you should ask in an interview. And honestly, that's not even in my wheelhouse. So when someone is applying for a position with me, that is a conversation they're having with HR. That is not a conversation they're having with me. And that would be the same in a teacher program as well, in a school.
Now, legally, public districts are required to place what's called their salary schedule online. So if you want to know what a district is paying for a first-year teacher, and it'll say something BS or BA, that's you, Bachelor's of Arts or Bachelor's of Science, that's you. You're going to see BA or BS, and then they're going to say level 1. You will be level 1 because you don't have years of experience. Those are the levels. So you can simply Google, Fullerton District salary schedule, and then you're going to find that there. Now, y'all will see the increments that can kind of grow your salary based on years of experience and additional education. So if y'all were to come back to GCU for a master's, hang out with me again in class, then you would increase your salary, and it shows what that is. Now, that doesn't mean that is your base pay. That doesn't mean you can't earn more. So I was in charge of various committees and get a small stipend. I coached 2 sports teams. I got a stipend for that. So you can make additional money. So don't just see that first number and think I'm sold. Really kind of think through what they have said are opportunities in the district, and then consider what that might look like with additional pay. But you are typically going to be BA, BS, level 1 on the salary schedule. Charter schools, that's a question you have to get when you're further into the process because they are not required to publish those online. Private schools, etc. Okay, good question. Let's do, for the sake of time, turn to the person next to you and talk about any lingering questions online if you want to type out your questions as well. The 30 seconds just to kind of spitball what's still on your mind.
Really? All right, let's come back together. Do you need an extra mic? Oh, no, thank you. You have a question though? Yeah. Okay. We're going to come back together and try to field your questions. Make sure that you feel really confident, and it can be something small and logistical in nature or something more sort of high-level conceptual about interviews, but we want to answer anything that's, I
on your minds and hearts. So Anna, I think I saw you had a question.
We were just talking, so for the unit plan and like the classroom management plan, so we provide copies for them, but do we pass those out with our resume? Or do we just wait until they ask a question and then we say like, here it is, or?
I would do that. I
Okay.
wouldn't want, because here's the other thing. What happens if too much information is given to you at once? That people are sitting there and they're looking at everything and they're not paying attention to what you're saying at the moment.
Okay.
So I would actually hold off in giving that until an opportunity presents itself in there. Oh, thank you for asking about my classroom management plan. I actually have examples of it listed here. Would you like to see a copy? And then at that point, you go through and you distribute a copy to everybody, and then you can kind of go through and talk about it. And then that's great because they're going to be able to see it and hear it at the same time, and I think that makes a really great impression.
Good question.
Do you hand out your resume though right away, like when you get in there?
So I offer it to them. When I come in and I sit, I go through and we do the introductions, make that eye contact. Nice to meet you. Thank you so much for having me today. I do have a copy of my resume if you wish to see it. And then to those of them that do, then I go ahead and give it to them.
And sometimes the interviewer will take the initiative to say, oh, I noticed that you brought in your resume. Let's go on and pass that out. So you can initiate it, or you may notice that your interviewer will initiate it.
So I've interviewed to be an RA a couple times now, and my RD, who was kind of helping me out last year, prepare for the returner presentation, he was just like, just so you know, there's a panel of about 15 of us, and we'd really love it if you'd come and like shake all of our hands. Is that something that you would recommend?
Shake
if
all
there's
hands?
Yeah.
Yeah, I personally
You
would.
want to leave an impression with each
Yeah.
and every one of them.
Yep.
Mhm.
Because
there
one person can be the reason you don't get a job. And so if you are ignoring, like there can be someone, it's sort of like a jury. Like if there are like dissenting members, like it's a hung jury, right? Like you have to make sure that everybody is on board with you, and you never know when someone has a little more clout than you think they have. And so if there's like somebody who's in charge of content or a department or a grade level, they might have some more power than you think. And if they don't like you and you haven't shaken, if you haven't taken that time to really make the eye contact, shake the hand, all of that, they might be the dissenting vote that says, sorry, the person's not for me, and I'm not really interested in having them on my team. So it sounds awkward, and I don't think any of y'all will ever have 15 on your panel, but you could have 5, 6, 7 on your panel of teachers, administrators, sometimes even staff. Yeah, other questions online?
Do you have any question ideas to ask in an interview with a school you've already been working in? So if they're a para interviewing to be a teacher, any specific questions?
So how long have they been there, I guess would be my question. Because if they've only been there a month or two, or they just started in August, my questions would probably be quite different than if somebody is there for 2 or 3 years. If you're there for 2 or 3 years, you are familiar with all the processes. If you've only been there a couple months, then you've still got a lot to learn, and you should be asking about all those questions that we just mentioned. Yeah, what do you think?
If they are familiar with you, then they would likely be knowledgeable about your personal strengths and weaknesses. And I might ask, I've been here for a while and you're familiar with my work. I'm always looking for opportunities to grow. Do you have any suggestions for me and how I can improve and make a better impact on the lives of the students here? Something along those lines, just because you're making that connection, but you're also saying, just because I've been here, I'm not assured a position here. And you're also indicating that there's opportunity for growth once again.
Right, and I think another question you could potentially ask if you're already familiar is, what has the transition been like for people in X position to go to Y position in the past? In other words, asking what is it like to be an instructional assistant and move to a teacher in your district? What is it like to be a para? Or even if you're just a student teacher, what is the process like for that student teacher to move into that teaching position? So I think it's fair to ask, has anyone transitioned from those roles before in your district, and what did that look like? Yeah, good. Other question?
All right, we are right there at the end. Yes, sorry, we'll do the last one.
Last question. Should you tell the school that you've interviewed at other locations?
I wouldn't necessarily.
I think it would only depend if they're pushing you to give an answer. They're like, we need to know in 24 hours what you want to do. I think in that case, you would just simply say, you know, for the sake of my family, I am interviewing in a couple different locations, and that's something that is important to my family at this time. You know, I was planning on family. It's important for my family to do at this time that I explore my options. And if you could give me another 24 or 48 hours to make a decision, I would be very, very grateful for that. They may say no, but the only time I would mention other schools or districts is if they're pushing you to sign a contract. And then they need to know, because of your family, maybe it's just you, but whatever, your family, you need time. Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys.
All right, our info's up here, so feel free to reach out if you have any questions.
Yeah, say after too, if you have individual questions, you're like, I know that I've got an interview with XYZ group, definitely let us know.